All right, we are in the home stretch of Drg Drsya Viveka. So he repeats himself a lot in this, so there is actually no need to summarize because uh, it's there's a lot of repetition in here. It's which also makes it great. It's great efficient. It's a very short read and very effective. It's great. So let's dive back into it. The notion of separation and limitation are merely thoughts produced by the mind that arise in awareness. The notion of being a separate, limited, and finite self arises as a mental emotional perception because of the mind's projection of and identification with the felt sense of limitation. When the projections of the mind are traced back to their origin, the notion of separation is healed, misperception ceases, and separation dissolves as the unreal notion that it is. Okay, that's almost a summary of everything we've talked about so far. So let's go on to the next verse. Awareness is whole and without parts. Statements such as "Thou art that." I'm gonna update the dictionary. So statements such as "You are that," "That you are," and "I am pure awareness." This self is pure awareness. Pure awareness is what everything is. Pure awareness is unknowable, and I am that unknowable. Reflect the truth of non-dual awareness. The notion of being separate, finite, and limited is not found in either the descriptions or realization of essential nature. So what he's saying here is all of our perceived problems come from the sense that we wrongly believe that we are a limited being that's finite and separate from everything we're perceiving. This is the whole crux of the whole study here. And when you investigate it, we find it not to be true. And once we find that those statements that he just went through are true, you are that which you're looking for. The self is pure awareness. You are really just existence and awareness and nothing else. That notion of being separate and finite and limited it dissolves. And by definition, once you notice you're not limited, obviously the notion that you're limited dissolves. Next verse. The illusion of separation, and it is an illusion, which is brought about by the two aspects of projection and concealment. Projection and concealment are what we talked about earlier. Your mind's power to create a story out of nothing, projection, and concealment, it means suspension of disbelief, where concealment of the fact that you've created this reality that you believe to be real. This belief that you believe to be real is concealment itself. Suspension of disbelief. So these two aspects he's talking about, when he talks about projection and concealment, he's talking about the power of you to create stories out of nothing and then forget that you've created stories out of nothing and believe them to be real. These two powers arise within and are not separate from awareness. The experience of separation appears to divide and limit the indivisible and unlimited nature of awareness and makes it appear as the world of separate objects and embodied separate I selves. Again, he's repeating himself here. This is exactly what we're talking about, that the act of experiencing, the act of seeing itself naturally creates a notion that something is seen and something is seeing it. So the act of seeing itself creates this seer and the seen relationship. That they're everything's separate objects. Next verse. The mind fallaciously appears to perform various actions as well as enjoys their results in the erroneous form of a separate individual. He's starting to get into the realm of disproving free will here. I know it's a hotly debated topic whether we have free will or not. I am going to I'm going to jump ahead and actually solve that topic very easily. Upon investigation, when you really look at it, the notion of volition, if there's a concept of you and that you make these decisions upon how you interact with the external world, and you cause things to happen to yourself and cause and effect and karma and all that stuff is actually, when you investigate it, all of it is found to be total nonsense. It's all part of the story that you've created as reality. The mind divides what is not two into a universe of separate objects of enjoyment, which consists of various combinations of the elements. Next verse. The sense of being a separate I self who experiences a separate universe has existed since the beginning of time. Debatable. Time is a creation of the dividing mind that splits what is timeless into the notion of past, present, and future. Okay, he's debating himself here. The notion of being a separate self who is aware of a separate universe has only empirical existence, meaning a tangible, testable existence, is only conceptual and remains true only until awakening as awareness. So space-time, cause and effect, past, present, and future, all of that only feels true when you don't actually investigate its actual truth. Once there is the awakening of awareness, as he puts it here, then it goes on to the next. Both self and world are not separate from awareness and are cognized to be real only as long as the mind projects, identifies with, and believes in the notion of separation. The story that you're telling yourself as reality. Next verse. As long as the belief in separation exists, the notion of causality exists. Cause and effect we're talking about, including karma. The mind projects the existence of the individual in the waking state and then imagines it afresh in the sleep and dream states. He's going back to that. Next verse. The individual and world that are cognized in the dream state are illusory. They're not real. We can't argue with that. Right? Who you are playing in a dream and everything going on in a dream, even though it feels real, we know that it's all projections of the mind. When dreaming ends, the dream self and all the dream objects are realized to be merely products of the dreaming mind. When you wake up, you're able to say, oh, that was just a dream. You know it wasn't real. Next verse. While the dream self believes that the dream world is real, the waking self believes that the dream world is unreal and the waking world is real. So when you wake up, we all experience this, when you wake up from a dream, everyone goes, that was a dream, it was not real, but this awake world is real. We all feel this way. But both these selves are only passing projections of the mind. So even when you are awake, upon investigation, when you stop and think about it, yourself, even in the waking world, is just a passing projection of the mind. Ephemeral concepts that come and go in awareness, which is the underlying reality, devoid of separate selves. Awareness is the real reality. Next verse. The self believes that the world is real. But this empirical world is unreal, meaning this tangible, testable, solid world is actually unreal. And he's supporting this by saying, as it disappears during deep sleep, meaning you don't concern yourself with it during deep sleep. The three worlds of waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep are ephemeral appearances. The real self, awareness, underlies and therefore transcends the three states of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. This is a common Hindu concept that comes up a lot, this waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. So you don't actually, your sense of self, your awareness is the only thing that's left during deep sleep. You don't believe that you are this person. You don't care about what you have going on. Even a loving mother forgets her baby exists during deep sleep. This is where the empirical world, a scientist would say, you are not conscious during deep sleep, but you're still aware. You're still have activity there. You're still aware that you went into deep sleep. So I heard this example, and this example is great. Imagine a train station, and there's a conductor at the train station. And there are two types of trains that come through this station. There is the commuter train, a passenger train, where everybody loads up and comes and goes for work, and there's a lot of activity. There's a freight train where there aren't a lot of people, but a lot of inanimate objects. Those are the two types of trains. And there's a conductor on this train. Or the conductor on the platform, I should say. So imagine this train station, and there's this conductor or employee standing on the platform. And the commuter train comes by. And it's filled with people in their suits and their briefcases, and they're extremely active, and they all board on this train, and then a bunch of people get off, and it's really active, and it's rush hour, and then the train pulls away, and there's nothing. Then imagine next comes the freight train, and the freight train it's carrying coal or gas or inanimate objects. It's kind of peaceful, but there's still there's an engineer on that train, and there's still a couple guys who work on that train. It pulls in, it stops, they get off, go to the bathroom, get back on the train, and go. Now, in this analogy, if you will, awareness is this employee standing on the platform of the train, watching these two trains go by. The active commuter train is the waking state. This not so active, but there's still stuff going on, freight train is the dream state. And in between those trains are nothing. There are no trains in between those trains. The commuter train leaves, there's a bunch of nothing. There is no train. Freight train comes in, then pulls away, and there's nothing. There is no train. This nothing, this concept of no train on the empty tracks is deep sleep. Now, all the while, there is still this employee watching it. He is the awareness. The awareness sees the waking state come and go. The awareness sees the dreams come and go. And the awareness is also aware of the lack of any activity, the deep sleep. So that's hopefully that makes sense after that analogy. That's what he's getting at here in this verse. When awareness is realized to be the underlying reality between all states, waking, dreaming, and even unconscious, the world of objects are realized to be merely reflections of awareness. So this is where it gets pretty confusing, but it's still pretty profound once you understand it. When you reach the point where you realize that things don't exist. Existence is taking the form of these things. You are not something that is aware of an object in front of you. There is awareness in general creating the notion of an object in front of you and you as somebody who is aware of that object in front of you. When they say merely reflections of awareness, that's what they mean. You have this awareness, and the reflections of awareness are this concept of a direct object of the awareness and something that is aware of that a direct object of the awareness. The underlying reality really is just awareness. So when I'm looking at this tablet, the me, I'm seeing this tablet. There really is just seeing. There's only an act of seeing. Seeing is all that's going on here. The tablet and the me that's seeing is all part of seeing. And they call them reflections because to an ancient Hindu, this feels like when you're looking in a mirror and it reflects back the reality, but the mirror itself is not the real you, right? You can't scratch the mirror and all of a sudden have a scratch on your face, right? It's just a reflection of what's standing in front of it. That's why they like to use the word reflection here. Next two verses together. The qualities of water, such as wetness, fluidity, coldness, sweetness, wave, foam, are inherent in water and are not separate from water except as conceptual names and forms. That makes sense when you think of it. So also being, consciousness, peace, and bliss, which are the natural characteristics of awareness, appear to be inherent in the so-called separate selves that reside in the waking and dream states. From the relative standpoint, wetness, foaminess, waves, fluidity, coldness, sweetness appear as separate qualities of water. So too do individual I selves and objects appear to be separate qualities of awareness. So does this make sense? Let's just go with two of them. Wetness and coldness, let's say, appear to be separate qualities of water, but in reality, these are just concepts. It's just water. We have assigned these names and qualities to help describe water. Wetness, it's wet. We say it's wet, it's cold because we're trying to describe water. But really, wetness and coldness are not separate qualities of water. There's just water. It's what we have created to help try to describe water. It's just water. So, in the same way, it's just awareness. We are trying to describe, I am aware. To try to describe awareness, we say, I am aware, and I am aware of something. To describe seeing, in order to describe seeing, I have to say, seeing. There's an I that sees the tablet. Me as the seer and the tablet as the seen are not separate qualities of seeing. There is just seeing, But in order to make sense of seeing, we create the seer and the seen. Make sense? All right. Next verse. 22 verses left. You're almost enlightened. All differences like wetness, foam, wave, which is just a form of water, coldness, fluidity, and sweetness are non-separate characteristics of the underlying essence of water. The characteristics of water have no existence separate from the water from which they arise. I'm going to say that again. The characteristics of water have no existence separate from the water itself from which these characteristics arise. So when you're describing water as wet, wet has no separate inherent you cannot separate wet from the water. You cannot take water and pull out something that is wetness. I mean, I suppose you could say you dehydrate the water, but change its shape. But the character, you know what I'm trying to get at, right? It's just an analogy, right? You can't separate out. You can't. Let's say there's a wave in the water. So you have a body of water, and there's a wave in the water. You can't pull out something called wave that's separate from the water. So a wave and the water aren't two separate things as wave plus water equals water wave. It's just water. Wave is a name we have given to a structure that we see that appears on water. It's not separate from the water itself. So all these characteristics appear and disappear in water. All characteristics of water are only aspects of their essential nature, water. Make sense? Okay. Last verse. You get it now. You're now free. So listen carefully. And feel free to listen to this over and over again until it really sinks in. And don't take my word for it. Feel free to debate it in your head. Because you'll see that it's true. But you really need to experience it yourself. So definitely listen to this over and over. Watch this over and over and over again until you're actually experiencing it. Feel free to debate it and come to your own conclusions. So here's the last verse. Upon waking up from the dream state, all characteristics of the dreamer, such as existence and consciousness, dissolve and are realized to be only projections of the dreaming mind. Okay? No argument there. Just so, upon awakening, and by awakening, he means the realization that there is just awareness. Actual reality is aware. Awareness is the only real thing that you, quote unquote, experience. And you don't really experience it because there is no you to experience it. But anyways, just so, upon awakening, all separate characteristics of the self dissolve and are realized to be only projections of non-dual awareness, and awareness with a capital A, non-dual awareness. As foam and wave have no existence separate from water, so also the entire universe, consisting of the separate self and the objective world around it have no existence separate from non-dual awareness. In truth, all that exists is non-dual awareness. All right. Feel free to bombard me with questions. That was Drg Drsya Viveka. To me, the most efficient text to take you from a state of a person who suffers to an enlightened existence where there actually is no such thing as suffering.